Okay. Okay. Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. As mentioned, my name is Carla Dodd. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Geosciences here at the Nelson Mandela University. And usually my research focus is on the hydrochemistry of coastal groundwater discharge related to groundwater-dependent ecosystems that we call microbialites. Margot, who I'm sure most of you have interacted with, is actually doing her master's on these systems, and I believe we'll be treating you to a presentation on that later this week, and also, I think, a field trip. So I won't say anything more on that for now. My goal for the day is rather to provide some food for thought regarding the hydrological processes in thicket vegetation and specifically water infiltration and the difference between an intact thicket vegetation and a degraded system. So I am actually a geologist. I have never worked on thicket restoration before, but Alistair and Margaret twisted my rubber arm, and I did some digging and some reading, and I'd just like to highlight some key findings from studies that actually have investigated this. And some of it may be intuitive, but bear with me. So to set the scene a bit, and as been mentioned before as well, South Africa is a semi-arid country, and the rainfall is both spatially and temporally controlled. So we have in the eastern, northern, and interior areas, we have summer rainfall. In the west, we have winter rainfall, and then along the south coast and a thin band in the west, we have year-round rainfall with small peaks during the autumn and spring. The amount of rainfall also varies spatially, with the amount decreasing from east to west and to a degree from south to north as well. And if you look at the thicket distribution, a large portion of this falls within the summer rainfall regions of the eastern and to a lesser degree the western Capes. And quite a large portion is in what we call the Water Management Area 7 of South Africa, the Msivubu-Tsitsikamma. And this is a region that is historically prone to droughts and even multi-year droughts, as we recently experienced firsthand as well, with record lows in our surface water levels being reported and the area being part of what was called a national disaster in terms of drought, which is, of course, quite concerning considering climate predictions that predict higher, hotter and drier periods more frequently in the future. Geologically, the biome is centered around the eastern extent of the Cape Fold Belt Mountains, and this is shown in the red box here, which is zoomed, and at the bottom I'm just showing the geology without the thicket overlay. So the thicket is this transparent white layer. And you can see in the northern part, the thicket is based primarily on what's characterized by Karoo supergroup rocks. These are sedimentary rocks, so mudstones, sandstones, a bit of shale, and then igneous intrusions of dolerite in some areas. In the central area, you have mostly Cape Fold Belt or Cape supergroup rocks. These are metasedimentary, a lot of quartzite sandstone interbedded with mudstone and shale. But quite a large proportion is based in these sedimentary basins of the Gamtoos and Algoa Bay, and these are younger rocks, so Mesozoic to Cenozoic, and they are composed of conglomerates, aeolianites, loose, unconsolidated sand. And when we're talking about water infiltration, your younger rocks are generally prone to weathering and erosion. So you can see here the erosion profile is more for the younger rocks, and then you have the more resistant Cape supergroup rocks. But this does not necessarily mean that water infiltration is better in your younger rocks than in the Cape Supergroup rocks, for example, because there's been a lot of deformation in the Cape Fault Belt, which results in cracks which allow water infiltration. But vegetation, of course, can also influence water infiltration. It's not just your bedrock geology. And there are two main factors that contribute to this, and that is your canopy cover and the soil organic content. And of course, there are several species that are canopy forming, but the hydrological or more hydrologically focused studies focus on Portulacaria afra, since this is heavily grazed and results in a loss of canopy cover. It's also one of the species that has a high leaf litter production, as I understand, which then also contributes to the soil organic carbon content. So one study looked at the speckboom in the Baviaanskloof area and the interception of rainfall. And they measured that about half of the gross rainfall was intercepted by the Thicket canopy, with about 49 to 63% of the rain reaching the ground surface as what they call throughfall. And the throughfall decreases to less than 20% for small rainfall events, so rainfall events that are lower than 5 millimeters. And if you compare this to the Amazon rainforest, for example, throughfall ranges from 74 to 91%. And for coniferous forests such as pine plantations, this throughfall is from 50 to 75%. And some subsequent research also in the Baviaanskloof area looked at intact versus degraded speckboom thicket, and they measured precipitation, throughfall, water infiltration, runoff, and sediment load. And they measured a 66% of throughfall, so 34% of rain was intercepted by the speckboom canopy and did not reach the ground surface. And this increased to 50% being intercepted during smaller rainfall events. And then you'd expect that because the canopy cover intercepts a lot of rain, that your water infiltration would be less for an intact thicket system than for a degraded system. But actually, what we see is that the intact speckboom thicket has higher infiltration. The soil has a higher water retention capacity, and therefore your soil moisture is higher, your runoff is less, which means your soil erosion is less, and the sediment load of your runoff is also less. And just for comparison, the degraded system had about 100 to 600 times lower water infiltration. The runoff was twice as high, and the sediment load in that runoff was 6 times higher. And this comes down to a domino effect that's related to the canopy cover and the organic matter content, or the litter layer. So the thicket canopy intercepts rain, your throughfall is less, and with that interaction with the canopy, your raindrops lose some of their kinetic energy. So they strike the ground with a slower velocity and less force. And this This favors water infiltration, and you have an increase in your base flow or your subsurface flow rather than the runoff on the surface, which means you have less soil erosion and, of course, then a lower sediment load. And then when we're looking at this litter layer and the soil organic carbon, you have a lot of roots penetrating the soil surface as well, which also facilitates water infiltration. Your soil aggregate stability increases, which means your water holding capacity and water retention increases. Your soil moisture increases. You also have a microclimate under your thicket canopy with your soil temperatures being up to 12 degrees lower, which also then prevents evaporation and so forth. And this all feeds back into your water infiltration. Another study by Mills and de Wet modeled water retention in different soil textures. And they considered the sand salt clay proportions of 80-10-10 to be consistent with what is found often in thicket vegetation areas. And they saw that if you increase the soil organic carbon through thicket restoration from 2% to about 5%, you see in the top 30 centimeters of your soil, you see a water storage increase of 250,000 liters of water per hectare. And if you do that across the thicket biome, this equates to about 2 billion liters of extra water storage capacity in your soil, which is roughly equivalent to 2 full Kocha dams. So to summarize, the hydrological impacts or implications of thicket restoration at a catchment scale means that yes, you will have lower runoff or surface flow, but you'll have an increase in your base flow or your subsurface flow. You also have less sedimentation, and sedimentation for your receiving aquatic systems such as dams and streams will decrease the water holding capacity. So you'll potentially have increase in your water holding capacity of your surface aquatic systems as well. And essentially, this could then combat water scarcity in an already water-stressed area, especially if you're talking about restoring canopy-forming species in degraded systems that originally did contain the, for example, speckbloom. And that's it from me.